The moment I heard my alpha say I meant nothing to him, the bond in my chest did not break loudly. It simply went quiet. Ethan Harper stood in the dim hallway outside Adrian Vale's private lounge with a warm bottle of milk in one hand and their sleeping pup tucked against his shoulder, Noah's soft cheek pressed into the collar of his sweater. The house was too big at night. All marble floors, tall windows, and cold blue shadows. The kind of beautiful place that looked expensive enough to impress strangers and empty enough to swallow a family whole. Ethan had been halfway to the nursery when he heard laughter behind the cracked door, deep alpha voices, glasses clinking, somebody saying Adrian's name with that lazy confidence rich men used when they knew the world would forgive them for anything. He should have kept walking. He knew that. He had learned over 2 years that nothing good came from standing near doors in Adrian's world. Still, his feet stopped. Maybe it was the way Noah shifted in his arms, tiny fingers curling into Ethan's shirt. Maybe it was the strange pinch under Ethan's ribs, the bond tugging once, hard, like a warning. Inside the room, one of Adrian's friends laughed and said, "Come on, Vale, don't tell me you've actually gone soft for that Omega and the kid." Another voice added, "You used to say mating was just biology. Now you're playing house." Ethan's breath caught. The milk bottle warmed his palm. Noah breathed softly against his neck, innocent, trusting, smelling faintly of baby shampoo and the lavender detergent Ethan used because Adrian once said it made the nursery feel peaceful. Then Adrian answered. His voice was calm. Too calm. The same voice he used in boardrooms, on phone calls, at charity dinners where Ethan stood beside him like a carefully chosen accessory. "Ethan isn't my mate," Adrian said. "He's just the Omega who gave me a pup." Silence did not fall. That would have been kinder. Instead, the men laughed, relieved, entertained, as if Adrian had just proven he was still one of them. Ethan stared at the thin line of gold light under the door and waited for Adrian to correct himself. He waited for anger, for defense, for one sharp sentence that would put the world back where it belonged. He waited for the alpha who held Noah during midnight fevers, who stood in the nursery doorway when he thought Ethan was asleep, who once brushed a crumb from Ethan's lip with such careful tenderness that Ethan had carried the memory for days. But Adrian said nothing. The bond inside Ethan's chest pulled again, then folded in on itself like a candle being pinched out. Ethan did not cry. He did not gasp. He did not drop the bottle or storm into the room or demand to know why the man who had marked every corner of his life could erase him in one sentence. He only looked down at Noah, at the dark lashes resting on pale little cheeks, at the small mouth parted in sleep, and something inside him became terribly clear. By morning, Adrian Vale would have exactly what he had claimed to want. No mate, no family, no embarrassing softness for his friends to laugh at. Ethan turned away from the door without making a sound, carrying their pup back through the beautiful, frozen house. Ethan waited until the laughter behind Adrian's door faded into the long, polished silence of the house before he moved again. The nursery lamp was still on, casting a soft amber circle over Noah's crib, the rocking chair, the tiny blue blanket folded with ridiculous care because Ethan had needed something in this house to stay gentle. He laid Noah down slowly, one hand under his small head, the other pressed to his own chest, as if he could hold the bond together by force. Noah sighed in his sleep, kicked once beneath his pajamas, and turned his face toward the little stuffed bear Adrian had bought in Boston after pretending he only stopped at the toy store because the driver needed gas. Ethan almost laughed at the memory. It came out as nothing. Just air. Just the sound of someone learning how to be quiet enough to survive. He crossed the room and opened the closet. Not everything. That was the first rule. Taking everything meant panic. Taking everything meant Adrian would understand too fast. So Ethan chose only what fit inside one canvas duffel bag. 3 outfits for Noah, 2 sweaters for himself, the folder with Noah's birth certificate and medical records, a bottle of scent blocker, the emergency cash he had hidden inside an old cereal box after one of Adrian's colder weeks, and the photograph from the hospital where Adrian was holding Noah for the first time with fear all over his perfect face. Ethan stared at that picture longer than he should have. In it, Adrian looked wrecked, sleepless, almost young. His thumb rested against Noah's tiny foot like he was afraid the world might steal him if he let go. Ethan placed the photograph face down on the changing table. He could not bring it. He could not leave it either. In the bedroom they had shared, Adrian's side of the bed was untouched, the sheets smooth and cold, smelling faintly of cedar, rain, and expensive soap. Ethan stood there with the duffel strap biting into his shoulder and looked at the life he had tried to build from scraps of almost tender, almost chosen, almost loved. Then he removed the slim silver bonding bracelet from his wrist. His fingers shook only once. The skin beneath it looked pale, marked by absence. Beside it, he placed the ring Adrian had given him without ceremony, as if romance was a language too embarrassing to speak out loud. Ethan found a notepad in the drawer and wrote one sentence. "Now you do not have to deny us anymore." He folded the paper once and set it under the bracelet. At 4:48 in the morning, with the sky over Connecticut turning gray at the edges, Ethan lifted Noah from the crib, wrapped him in the blue blanket, and walked out through the side entrance used by staff. The driveway gravel crunched softly under his sneakers. Every step away from the house hurt. Every step also felt like breathing. At the end of the road, a rideshare waited with its headlights dimmed. Ethan climbed into the back seat, buckled Noah against him, and did not look back until the gates disappeared behind the trees. Adrian Vale woke at 7:16 to a house that felt wrong before he understood why. At first, it was only the silence. Not the usual early morning quiet of polished floors and distant staff voices, but a silence with edges, a silence that stood in the doorway and watched him open his eyes. He reached across the bed without thinking. His hand found cold sheets. That was not unusual. Ethan often rose early with Noah, moving around the nursery in soft socks, humming under his breath as if the baby needed music more than sleep. Adrian sat up, pressed his fingers to the bridge of his nose, and told himself the strange pressure in his chest was nothing. Then he noticed the smell, or rather, the absence of it. Ethan's scent, usually faintly woven through the room like vanilla tea and warm cotton, was gone. Not faded. Gone. Adrian stood too fast. The bedroom tilted for half a second before he crossed to the nursery, his bare feet silent against the hardwood. The door was open. The crib was empty. The blue blanket was gone. The little bear remained on its side near the pillow, one stitched arm bent as if reaching for someone who had already left. Adrian stared at it, waiting for his mind to supply a reasonable explanation. Doctor appointment. Morning walk. Breakfast downstairs. Anything. Then he saw the photograph face down on the changing table. His hand moved before he decided to move it. He turned it over and saw himself younger by only a year, holding Noah like a miracle he did not deserve. His throat tightened. Beside the photograph sat Ethan's phone, powered off, clean of fingerprints. Adrian's pulse began to pound with a calm so sharp it almost frightened him. He went back to the bedroom and saw the bracelet, the ring, the folded note. For several seconds, he could not touch any of it. The silver bracelet looked absurdly small on the dark wood, too delicate to be the thing that had once told the whole world Ethan belonged beside him. Finally, Adrian opened the paper. "Now you do not have to deny us anymore." The words did not shout. They did not accuse. That made them worse. Adrian read the sentence once, then again, and the memory returned with cruel precision. The lounge, the laughter, Mason asking whether he had gone soft, his own voice answering too quickly, too coldly, because pride had always been easier than truth. "Ethan is not my mate. He is just the Omega who gave me a pup." Adrian gripped the note until the paper creased. Downstairs, someone dropped a pan in the kitchen, and the sound snapped the house back into motion. Within minutes, every staff member was awake. Security footage was pulled. Drivers were questioned. The gate logs were checked. Adrian spoke in the clipped tone that made board members obey and attorneys sweat. "Find them," he said. "No delay. No excuses." But by 8:32, the first report came back. Ethan had left through the side entrance. By 8:50, the rideshare account led to a station in New Haven. By 9:10, the trail ended. His credit cards were untouched. His bank account had been closed. His scent had been blocked so thoroughly that even Adrian could catch only a ghost of lavender near the gate, fading into cold morning air. Mason called at 9:17, laughing softly, asking if the Omega was still sulking. Adrian looked at the empty crib, at the tiny bear, at the note still shaking in his hand, and for the first time in his life, his voice broke when he said, "Never speak about my family like that again." The call ended with Mason still saying Adrian's name, But Adrian did not listen long enough to hear the rest. He stood in Noah's nursery with the phone lowered at his side and the small bear in his other hand, its soft brown fur pressed into his palm like an accusation. For years, Adrian had been praised for his control. He was the alpha who never raised his voice, never showed his hand, never let a room know where the vulnerable places were. His father had called that strength. His grandfather had called it breeding. His friends had called it discipline, while laughing over glasses of bourbon and pretending cruelty was a family tradition instead of a failure of imagination. Adrian had believed them for too long. He had believed that loving Ethan quietly would protect him, that keeping his Omega away from boardroom politics and family dinners would spare him the sharp little smiles, the measured insults, the old money alphas who looked at Noah as if a child could be evaluated like a trust fund. 2 weeks earlier, his uncle Malcolm had sat across from him in the downstairs study, gray suit perfect, silver hair perfect, every word dipped in poison and polished until it sounded like advice. "You are making enemies for a pretty little domestic fantasy," Malcolm had said, folding his hands over his cane. "The veil line needs an acceptable Omega beside it. The pup can be acknowledged later, if necessary, but the Omega should be handled quietly." Adrian had told him to leave. Malcolm had only smiled. People who smiled like that never needed to slam doors. They had lawyers, inheritance boards, private investigators, and old family favors that moved through Connecticut like fog. So when Mason and the others came over, when they teased and pushed and waited for Adrian to prove he had not been softened by Ethan's laugh, Ethan's tea, Ethan asleep in the nursery chair with Noah tucked against his chest, Adrian had chosen the ugliest mask he owned. He had thought if they believed Ethan meant nothing, they would stop looking at him. He had thought shame could be used as a shield. He had not understood that a shield held the wrong way became a blade facing home. By noon, the mansion felt less like a residence and more like a museum after closing, all echo and expensive air. Adrian sat alone in the study, the same room where Malcolm had spoken of Ethan like a problem to be solved, and watched security footage again. Ethan appeared on the screen at 4:48 in the morning, smaller than Adrian remembered, his sweater pulled over one shoulder, Noah bundled against him, a duffel bag swinging from one hand. He paused near the side gate. Just once. Not long enough to turn back. Long enough for Adrian to see the hesitation and hate himself for causing it. Ethan had not fled like someone dramatic. He had left like someone who had already begged in silence and finally accepted the answer. Adrian replayed those 12 seconds until his assistant, Claire, entered without knocking, something she had never dared to do before. Her eyes moved to the paused image on the screen, then to the bracelet on his desk. "I found the rideshare driver," she said gently. "He dropped them at New Haven Union Station." Ethan paid cash for 2 tickets. Destination was Boston, but that may have been a diversion. Adrian nodded once. His throat felt raw, though he had barely spoken all day. Claire hesitated. "There is something else. Your uncle called my office 3 times this morning asking whether the child remains on the estate." Adrian went very still. Outside the tall windows, rain began tapping against the glass, soft at first, then steady. He looked down at Noah's bear beside the folded note and understood with a cold clarity that arrived far too late. Ethan had not only left because Adrian broke his heart. Ethan had left because some part of him had sensed what Adrian had been too arrogant to explain. Adrian picked up his phone and called Malcolm directly. When his uncle answered, amused and patient, Adrian did not give him the comfort of anger. He only said, "Ethan is my mate. Noah is my son. If you contact them, search for them, or speak of handling them again, you will lose access to every veiled door you still think belongs to you." Then he hung up, opened the bottom drawer of his desk, and took out the photograph Ethan had left behind. For the first time since morning, Adrian let himself look at it without flinching. His family had been in his hands once. He had held them like something fragile. Then he had let pride teach him to loosen his grip. Now all he had left was an empty house, a silent bond, and the unbearable knowledge that finding Ethan would be easier than earning the right to stand near him again. 3 months later, Ethan Harper learned that freedom could be warm and exhausting at the same time. It smelled like flour on his sleeves, apple cinnamon cooling on metal racks, laundry drying over the radiator, and Noah's baby shampoo lingering in the collar of every sweater he owned. The town was called Briar Glen, Vermont, small enough that the mail carrier knew everyone's dog by name, and cold enough in January that the windows frosted white before sunrise. Ethan lived above a bakery on Maple Street in a one-bedroom apartment with slanted ceilings, creaky pipes, and a heater that made dramatic clanking noises every time it decided to do its job. It was nothing like the Vale estate. No marble floors. No silent staff. No gates. No chandelier lights spilling across rooms too polished to feel lived in. Here, the kitchen table wobbled unless Ethan shoved a folded napkin under one leg. The couch had come from a church donation sale, and Noah's crib stood beside Ethan's bed because there was nowhere else to put it. It should have felt like failure. Somehow, most mornings, it felt like air. Ethan woke at 5:15, dressed in the dark, tied an apron over his sweater, and carried Noah downstairs while the bakery ovens were still warming. Mrs. Alvarez, the owner, always pretended not to notice when Ethan looked tired enough to fall asleep standing up. She only handed him coffee with too much cream and said, "You are early, sweetheart," like she had not unlocked the back door specifically for him. Noah spent the mornings in a playpen near the office, stacking wooden blocks with great seriousness while Ethan kneaded dough, filled pastry shells, and smiled at customers who called him honey without asking questions. By noon, his arms ached. By 2, his scent blocker usually started wearing thin. By 4, the old bond in his chest became a dull, familiar bruise, especially when Noah pointed at a tall man in a dark coat through the window and whispered, "Daddy?" Ethan always smiled. Softly, carefully. "No, baby," he would say, brushing crumbs from Noah's cheek. That is not him. The worst part was not that Noah missed Adrian. The worst part was that some days, Noah did not. Children were merciful in ways that broke adults open. The memory of Adrian's cedar rain scent faded from Noah's blankets first, then from the blue sweater Ethan had stolen long ago, then from the stuffed bear they had eventually brought because Noah refused to sleep without it. Ethan should have been grateful. Instead, he sat on the bathroom floor one night after Noah's fever finally broke, holding the bear against his chest and crying so quietly that even the radiators sounded louder. He hated Adrian for what he had said. He hated himself for still remembering how Adrian used to warm Noah's bottles exactly 7 seconds longer because he said the temperature was better that way. He hated that love did not vanish just because dignity finally arrived. Outside, snow fell over Maple Street in soft silver. Sheets, covering tire tracks, mailboxes, porch steps, everything. Ethan watched it through the narrow window and told himself that being hidden was the same as being safe. Then, the next morning, while he was arranging cranberry muffins in the front display, the bell above the bakery door chimed. Cold air swept in. Conversations thinned. Ethan looked up with powdered sugar on his fingers and felt the bond in his chest wake like something frightened from sleep. Adrian Vale stood just inside the door, black coat dusted with snow, eyes hollow from months of searching, staring at Ethan as if the whole world had narrowed to one impossible room. For one suspended second, Ethan forgot the weight of the tray in his hands, the bell above the door still trembling behind Adrian, the smell of butter and cranberries rising between them like something too ordinary for a moment this impossible. Adrian looked thinner than Ethan remembered, not weak, never that, but worn at the edges in a way the Vale mansion would never have allowed anyone to see. His black wool coat was buttoned wrong at the top. Snow clung to his dark hair. His jaw was freshly shaved, but shadows sat under his eyes as if sleep had become a country he could no longer enter. Ethan hated that he noticed. He hated that his first instinct was not fear, but the old, stupid urge to ask whether Adrian had eaten. The tray slipped half an inch. Mrs. Alvarez caught it from the side with the calm efficiency of a woman who had survived 4 children, 2 divorces, and 30 Vermont winters. She looked at Ethan, then at Adrian, and said nothing at all. That kindness nearly ruined him. Adrian took one step forward. Ethan. His name sounded different in Adrian's mouth now. Not like possession, not like habit, like a prayer someone had no right to say out loud. Ethan set the tray on the counter and wiped powdered sugar from his fingers onto his apron, because if he did not do something with his hands, they would shake. "You should not be here," he said. Adrian stopped immediately. That hurt more than if he had ignored him. "I know." "No," Ethan said, his voice low enough that the customers near the window pretended very hard to. "Study the menu board." "I do not think you do." The office door behind the counter creaked open, and Noah toddled out wearing one striped sock, one dinosaur sock, and the solemn expression of a child who had escaped supervision with purpose. He clutched the brown stuffed bear under one arm. "Papa," he announced, as if the entire bakery had been waiting for him. Then he saw Adrian. The whole room seemed to inhale. Noah tilted his head. His gray-blue eyes, Adrian's eyes, widened with careful recognition. For weeks, he had seen Adrian only in the photograph Ethan kept hidden in a cookbook and sometimes failed to hide well enough. Noah lifted the bear a little. "Daddy?" Adrian's face changed so completely that Ethan almost looked away. The control, the polished coldness, the entire veil inheritance of silence, all of it cracked without a sound. He lowered himself to one knee right there on the bakery floor, careful, slow, leaving several feet between them. "Hi, Noah," he said, and his voice broke on the second syllable. Noah looked at Ethan for permission. That was what finished the last soft part of Ethan's heart. Their pup had learned to ask whether love was safe. Ethan stepped in front of him, not roughly, not dramatically, just enough to make the boundary clear. Adrian saw it. His eyes flicked from Ethan's body to Noah's little hand curled in Ethan's apron. "I am not here to take him," Adrian said. Ethan laughed once, quiet and empty. "You do not get praised for not doing the worst possible thing." "I know. Do you?" Ethan asked. "Because the last time I heard you speak about us, we were not your family." A muscle moved in Adrian's cheek. The bakery was silent except for the heater ticking near the front window and Noah whispering something to his bear. Adrian bowed his head. "I said it. I will not insult you by pretending I did not." Ethan swallowed, but the old wound was awake now, bright and merciless. "You said I was just the Omega who gave you a pup." Noah leaned against Ethan's leg, too young to understand the words, old enough to feel the weather in the room change. Ethan rested a hand gently on his hair. "So do not answer him if tomorrow you plan to deny him. Do not kneel in front of him if you are only lonely. Do not look at me like you lost something precious when you were the one who set it down in front of everyone and called it nothing." Adrian closed his eyes for one brief second. When he opened them, they were wet, but he did not reach for sympathy. He only placed a small paper bag on the nearest table. Inside was the silver bracelet, the ring, and the photograph Ethan had left behind. "I brought these because they are yours," Adrian said. "Not because I expect you to wear them. Not because I expect anything." Ethan stared at the bag as if it might burn through the table. "Why did you come?" Adrian looked at Noah, then back at Ethan. "Because I finally understood that finding you is not the same as being allowed back. I came to ask where to stand so I do not scare you." The answer rose in Ethan sharp as winter air. "Outside." Adrian did exactly what Ethan told him to do. He went outside. No argument, no wounded pride, no alpha command slipping through the cracks. Only a quiet nod before he stepped back into the snow and let the bakery door close between them. For the rest of the afternoon, Ethan tried not to look through the front window. He failed so often that Mrs. Alvarez eventually slid a tray of cooled turnovers in front of him and said, "Sweetheart, either stare properly or frost these before they become fossils." Ethan wanted to laugh. He almost did. Outside, Adrian stood beneath the green awning with his coat collar turned up against the wind, not pacing, not calling, not trying to make the town notice him. He simply waited where Ethan had put him. Across the bakery, Noah sat in his playpen holding the stuffed bear, occasionally peeking toward the window with the solemn curiosity of someone trying to match a living person to a fading memory. Once, when Adrian lifted a gloved hand in a small wave, Noah hid his face against the bear, then peeked again 2 seconds later. Ethan's chest hurt in 3 separate places. By closing time, the snow had thickened into soft white curtains, and Maple Street glowed under strings of yellow lights. Ethan bundled Noah into his puffy jacket and dinosaur hat, locked the bakery door behind Mrs. Alvarez, and found Adrian still there, shoulders dusted white, lashes wet from melted snow. "You are going to get sick," Ethan said before he could stop himself. Adrian looked at him as if those 5 words were more mercy than he deserved. "I booked a room at the inn across the street. I can leave now." Noah leaned against Ethan's hip and whispered, "Daddy cold." The words were tiny. They landed enormous. Adrian's eyes dropped to the sidewalk. Ethan hated every version of this. He hated Adrian waiting. He hated Noah noticing. He hated himself most for understanding both of them. You can walk us to the corner, Ethan said. Only the corner. Adrian nodded once. The three of them moved down Maple Street with a careful distance between them. Ethan on the inside, near the storefronts. Adrian near the curb, Noah between the worlds, watching his boots leave small, uneven prints in the snow. No one spoke until a black town car rolled slowly past the bakery and stopped under the street lamp ahead. Ethan felt Adrian change before he moved. Not aggressively, not loudly, just colder, sharper, every line of him going still. The rear window lowered, revealing Malcolm Vale's silver hair and pleasant, poisonous smile. Ethan Harper, Malcolm said, as if they were meeting at a charity luncheon instead of a snowy street. You have been difficult to locate. Ethan's hand tightened around Noah's mitten. Adrian stepped forward, placing himself between the car and his family without touching either of them. You were told not to come near them. Malcolm sighed. Adrian, do not make a public scene. I am here to discuss the child's future. A Vale heir should not be living above a bakery in a town with one stoplight. Noah pressed against Ethan's leg. Ethan felt his fear arrive quietly, not as panic, but as a steady cold climbing his spine. Adrian did not raise his voice. That made him sound more dangerous than anger ever had. Noah's future is with Ethan. Any conversation about my son begins and ends with his father, and Ethan is his father. Malcolm's smile thinned. You are emotional. No, Adrian said, looking directly at him. I was emotional when I let men like you teach me that love should be hidden too. Be useful. I am clear now. The street seemed to hold its breath. Malcolm's gaze flicked to Ethan, then to Noah, calculating and calm. This is not over. Adrian reached into his coat and took out a folded envelope. It is for you. A legal notice. My attorneys filed this morning. Your access to the family trust, the estate records, and all private information concerning Ethan and Noah has been revoked. If you approach them again, it becomes a legal matter before sunset. For the first time, Malcolm Vale looked surprised. Only for a second. Then the window rose, the car pulled away, and the red taillights disappeared into the snow. Ethan stood frozen with Noah against him, his heart beating so hard it blurred the edges of the street. Adrian turned, but did not come closer. I should have told you, he said. About him. About all of it. Ethan's voice came out thin. Yes, you should have. Adrian accepted that like a sentence. Noah tugged Ethan's sleeve and looked toward the empty road. Bad Grandpa gone. Ethan let out a broken little breath that almost became a laugh. Adrian crouched several feet away, hands visible, voice gentle. Yes, buddy. He is gone. Noah studied him for a long moment, then held out the stuffed bear toward Adrian, not giving it away, only showing it. Daddy Bear, he said softly. Adrian covered his mouth with one hand, and Ethan looked up at the falling snow because watching Adrian break quietly was too much. The corner was only 10 feet away. Ethan could still send him back. He should send him back. Instead, when Noah reached one mittened hand toward Adrian, Ethan did not stop him. Noah's mittened hand hovered in the snowy air between them, small and uncertain, and Adrian looked at it, as if the entire world had offered him something too fragile to touch. He did not grab. He did not rush. He only held out one gloved finger, palm up, waiting until Noah decided for himself. Noah studied him with grave toddler suspicion, then wrapped his tiny hand around Adrian's finger and gave it one experimental squeeze. Adrian inhaled once, sharp and quiet, and Ethan felt the bond inside his chest answer before he could command it not to. Not healed, not forgiven, only awake. The next week moved strangely, like a storm passing over a house that had not yet decided whether to stand. Adrian stayed at the inn across the street. Every morning, he bought one black coffee he barely drank and one blueberry muffin he left untouched until Noah pointed at it and demanded a bite. Every afternoon, he walked them only as far as Ethan allowed. Sometimes that meant the corner. Sometimes the bakery door. Once, when Noah fell asleep against Ethan's shoulder during a sudden snowfall, Adrian silently held an umbrella over them for 6 blocks and never once tried to step closer than the distance Ethan had set. People in Briar Glen noticed, of course. Small towns did not gossip loudly. They just became extremely interested in sweeping sidewalks that were already clean. Mrs. Alvarez called Adrian the sad tall one, which made Ethan snort frosting onto his apron and then pretend it had not happened. But peace did not last. It never did when the Vale name was involved. On Friday morning, Claire called Adrian while Ethan was boxing cinnamon rolls behind the counter. Adrian's face changed before he said a word. His shoulders squared, not in anger, but in preparation. The family council had scheduled an emergency review in Hartford. Malcolm was challenging Noah's guardianship, not because he could win easily, but because powerful men liked making kind people prove they deserved to keep what was already theirs. Ethan listened from behind the counter, hands still buried in wax paper, and felt the old cold return. Adrian ended the call and looked at him. "You do not have to come," he said. Ethan almost laughed. 3 months ago, Adrian would have made decisions around him like weather around a house. Now he asked, and somehow that made the answer harder. Ethan looked toward the office where Noah was singing to his bear in a language known only to toddlers and possibly kitchen appliances. Then he removed his apron. "I am not hiding while people discuss my son." The council room in Hartford smelled like leather chairs, old money, and polished disapproval. Ethan wore his best gray sweater. Noah sat on his lap with the bear tucked under his chin. Adrian stood beside them, not in front of them, not above them, beside them. Malcolm spoke first, smooth as ever, about stability, legacy, proper households, appropriate bonds. He never said Ethan was unworthy. He was too careful for that. He only built a room out of words where Ethan did not belong. Then Adrian stepped forward. "I denied Ethan once," he said. The room went still. Ethan's fingers tightened around Noah's coat. Adrian did not look away from the council table. "I denied him because I was a coward. Because I confused silence with protection and pride with strength. I let my mate believe he was something I was ashamed of, and I let my son live in a house where love had to move quietly to survive. That failure is mine, not his, not theirs." Malcolm's expression hardened. "Adrian, this is not the place for personal confession." "This is exactly the place," Adrian said. "Because every person in this room has heard a version of the lie. So hear the truth clearly. Ethan Harper is my mate. Noah is my son. They are not a private inconvenience, not a domestic mistake, not a weakness to be managed. They are my family. If the Vale name cannot survive me saying that aloud, then the Vale name deserves to become smaller than them." Ethan stared at him, unable to breathe around the ache rising in his throat. The words did not erase the hallway, or the note, or the months Noah slept under a roof with bad pipes because love had finally needed a hiding place. But this time, Adrian had not whispered where no one could hear. This time, he chose them in the room that had taught him not to. The council did not clap. Rooms like that never rewarded love for speaking in a voice they could not control. They only shifted, murmured, adjusted cuff links, and looked toward Malcolm as if waiting for him to turn humiliation into strategy. But Malcolm had gone very still at the head of the table, his pleasant mask thinner than Ethan had ever seen it. Adrian did not sit down. He placed one hand on the back of Ethan's chair, not touching Ethan, just near enough for everyone to understand where he had chosen to stand. The vote that followed was quiet and formal. Malcolm's petition was dismissed. Noah remained exactly where he had always belonged, in Ethan's arms, sleepy and warm, with one fist tangled in the collar of Ethan's gray sweater. Outside the building, Hartford was gray with late afternoon rain, the kind that made streets shine like dark glass. Adrian walked them to the car, umbrella tilted more over Ethan and Noah than himself. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Ethan stopped beside the curb and looked at him. "You were late," he said. Adrian nodded. "I know." The words landed without defense. That mattered. Not enough to fix everything, but enough to keep the conversation alive. You do not get to erase what happened because you finally said the right thing in front of the right people. "I know," Adrian said again, softer this time. "I am not asking you to come home." Ethan looked toward Noah, who had fallen asleep against his shoulder with the bear smashed between them. Home had become a complicated word. The mansion in Connecticut had never felt like one. The apartment above the bakery barely fit their lives, but it had held them when Ethan had nowhere else to go. Adrian followed his gaze and seemed to understand. "I put the estate on the market," he said. Ethan blinked. "What?" "It was built for men like Malcolm to feel powerful in. I do not want Noah learning to whisper in those halls. I found a house in Briar Glen, 3 blocks from the bakery. Small yard. Yellow kitchen. The porch needs work. I have not bought it. I wanted to ask first." Ethan stared at him through the rain. Once, Adrian had given orders and called them care. Now he stood soaked at the edge of a sidewalk, asking permission to hope. Something in Ethan's chest loosened painfully. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the first breath after holding one for too long. 2 months later, the yellow kitchen smelled like pancakes, coffee, and Noah's triumphant attempt to feed banana slices to his stuffed bear. Adrian had learned that toddlers did not respect expensive shirts, that bedtime stories required voices, and that Ethan hated being asked if he was tired when he was clearly tired, but loved being handed tea without comment. He took the small bedroom near the stairs at first, because Ethan had said boundaries, and Adrian had said yes before his face could betray how much it hurt. Some nights, Ethan found him asleep on the hallway floor outside Noah's room, one hand resting near the door, guarding without claiming. Spring came slowly to Vermont. Snow melted into silver puddles. The bakery started selling lemon tarts. Noah learned to say both Papa and Daddy in the same breath, usually when demanding snacks. And one evening, after a long day of rain, Ethan found Adrian on the porch sanding the railing by hand, because Noah had gotten a splinter the week before and Adrian had treated it like a personal failure. Ethan stood in the doorway with 2 mugs of tea. Adrian looked up, careful as always now. Ethan handed him 1 mug, then sat beside him. Their shoulders did not touch at first. Then, gently, deliberately, Ethan let his scent drift into the cool evening air. Adrian went completely still. Ethan looked at the wet street, the bakery lights glowing 3 blocks away, Noah laughing inside at some cartoon, and the repaired bond in his chest gave one quiet, cautious pull. "You can come upstairs tonight," Ethan said, "just to read him a story with me." Adrian closed his eyes for a second, and when he opened them, they held no victory, only gratitude. "I would like that," he said. Later, Noah fell asleep between them before the book was finished, one small hand on Ethan's sleeve and the other wrapped around Adrian's finger. The house was not grand. The porch still needed paint. The kitchen table wobbled unless someone fixed the leg properly. But when Ethan looked across their sleeping pup and saw Adrian watching them like love was no longer something to hide, he finally understood that leaving had not ended their family. It had forced it to be rebuilt in a place warm enough to survive the truth.